Welcome to the walk-off, everybody. I'm Scott Belford, and we have a very special episode for you today. So, right now, sitting with me, truly one of the reasons why I'm a baseball fan today, it is my Uncle Al Bromley. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scotty. Great to be here. I've been waiting for this opportunity.
Oh, yes, to chat baseball. I'm excited. This is what we do when we get together, anyways. So we might as well record it and create some content. So, for everyone who normally watches the show, I will say that you can expect a very different episode here. If you're waiting for breaking news in the baseball world, well, join the masses. I mean, I think Jose Siri becoming a Met is the most excitement we've had. So, what my Uncle Al and I are going to do here is we're going to do some reminiscing. We're going to tell some baseball stories. We're going to talk about the Montreal Expos. I know that I was telling you this in the preamble before we hit record for the public, but I just watched a documentary that made me think of you and Auntie Rayanne just nonstop. And it's called Nos Amour, the saga of the Montreal Expos. And it kind of touched on their attempt to get interest in reviving
Yeah,
Montreal as a MLB team in 2012 and just kind of finding ownership and, the grassroots attempt that they're going through. So
yeah.
let's talk the Expos here for a second. I know we touched on it a little bit. Um, you and Auntie Rayanne have numerous stories about you saw them in Montreal a couple times, correct?
Yeah, yeah. And I guess our very first exposure to the Expos was back in 1979. We saw, it was hilarious. A skinny 6'3", 165-pound shortstop by the name of Andres Galarraga. And the kid from Venezuela was gangly. But even then, I think we saw him with 100 people in the old park in Calgary, and even then, there was something about him that stood out. And fast forward to 2000, I think it was 2002. Elgato Grande was back with the Expos for
Yes.
one more gig, and it was such a thrill to see him. But he wasn't 6'3", 165 anymore. I think he was 6'3", 265. So it was a slight change in physical shape. But
Yeah.
yeah, he was awesome. He was such a dynamic player, and I think worthy of one of the all timers for the
Well,
Expos.
the Expos were such an interesting team for so many reasons. I mean, if you look at that 1994 team, this is the lowest payroll in baseball. They finished at 74 and
70,
40.
yeah, yeah,
This is coming off the Blue Jays winning a World Series in 92 and 93 with the highest payroll in baseball. So we were
yeah,
kind of seeing the two Canadian teams doing it in incredibly different ways. And I know before we hit record for the public here, you were listing off names of that 1994 team. It was just such a dominant group of guys in Marquise Grissom, Roman center field, and then you had Larry Walker next to him, and I mean Mike Lansing manning second base, and a
yeah.
young Pedro Martinez. Like it really was a team that I know we touched on it before we were going to the public side, but you think you think this was a World Series contending team without a doubt.
Well, it was crazy. It was crazy good team. And beyond, you can't go past the hitters, but like if you looked at even the like the bullpen, I thought one of the coolest things about the Expos in 1994 was the fact that Felipe didn't go with analytics. He didn't go with stats. He went with players that were good. Did you know in his bullpen, his five top bullpen arms were righties? There was no lefties. It went right down the line, like Mal Rojas, John Wetland, um, again and again and again. It was pretty cool how many of those players were on that team because of Felipe Alou's recognition of talent. And I was amazed when I first saw Felipe. He was never afraid. never afraid to make outrageous moves. And I don't know if it's on the documentary, Scotty, but back in 93, they were chasing the Phillies for the pennant and they were falling out of the picture. 6 games back, right? They had built up a big lead and then they coughed it up. So seventh inning, they're down 7-4. There's 46,000 people watching the game in Montreal that night. And a lot of people, a lot of longtime Expo fans say this was their Reggie Jackson moment. This was the 3 home run moment for the Expos because they never went to the World Series. But pitcher spot came up and he pulled in, um, he brought in, I'm sorry, Curtis Pride. Curtis Pride was deaf,
The
right?
deaf guy, that's right.
Yeah. And he was more than a raw rookie. I mean, this guy had almost no at bats in the majors. So he comes up, Bobby Thigpen, pretty good pitcher for the Phillies. He gives him a high hard one, and Pride rips it. He goes for a double, scores two. It's 7-6, and Pride is sitting on second. And the roof is lifting off. The noise is just deafening. And Pride has got his arms crossed and he's staring blankly toward third. And finally, they called a timeout, and I think it was Jerry Manuel who was the third base coach. He calls Curtis Pride over. He waves over, and Pride walks over there, and he read lips, right? And Pride he says to Curtis Pride, "Tip your hat." Huh? Tip your hat. The crowd is cheering for you. Tip your
No
hat.
way. I love it. And he couldn't hear, of course.
He couldn't hear it, but he said he could feel the sound vibrations coming from the turf. That's how loud that place was. And it was almost like the whole crowd embraced him just for what he had overcome for that one moment. And if you ever get to read Up and Away, which is the definitive Expos book, people talked about that as the defining moment for the Montreal Expos. It was such a rush, and then he held his hand on his heart, realizing that these cheers were for him, and it was just so cool. It was just so cool. And again, Felipe, he went with that guy when nobody in a pennant race would ever consider that move, but it
That's
was
exactly
always
what I was going to say. Is like Felipe, I mean, it was kind of his MO is he had the ability to develop this young talent and know how to push these young guys when they were ready to like be put in these big moments and he wouldn't worry about what the press or the dinosaurs in baseball thought about it, right? Like
no, no, that's
fearless.
for sure. That's for sure. But you talk about wow, what a team. Like just to, and when you look back, there was the Atlanta Braves, they had Maddox, Greg Maddox, they had Tom Glavine. They were the big dogs at that time.
John
And,
Smoltz. I mean, we're
well, yeah, there you go. Yeah. But and here's another family story. Sorry, folks. But my uncle, Scotty's great uncle, Uncle Jim, he was a huge Atlanta fan, and he would come up and visit me every year from uh, from Florida. And and I said, Uncle Jim, your Braves are toast. You have no idea how good this team of ours is. And he was very
yeah.
he didn't buy it at all. So
When
we
you
got to
got three
watch it.
future Hall of Famers in your starting staff, you're pretty confident.
So we watched every game, and they just kicked Atlanta's butt. And then they went back to Atlanta and swept them in a series after
Right.
that as well.
Yeah.
There was a quote, I think it was from Larry Walker. He said, um, I think Atlanta is the hamburger. Where's the steak? If it, I think it was a good shot at Atlanta. That's for sure. But there was a lot of the building of that team was just so. I think a lot of what the Expos had to do was look at teams with desperate needs and then bring in somebody better in return. And you can't go any farther than Pedro Martinez. That prior year in the offseason, the way this thing rolled out was the Dodgers had Jody Reed as their second baseman, and I'm trying to remember the name of the guy, but they were chasing Robbie Thompson, that's who it was, from the Giants to be their second baseman because Reed was kind of a ham and egger now. He wasn't quite the Dodger second baseman they were looking for. But Thompson ended up signing back with San Francisco. And so the Dodgers started pursuing Delano DeShields, right?
Right.
And also El Presidente, Dennis Martinez, opted to pursue free agency. So they had a spot in their starting rotation. But do you know that in his year with the Dodgers, 99 and two-thirds out of 107 innings that he pitched was in relief, short inning
I
relief.
did not know that.
And what ended up happening, it was just the craziest thing, but Kevin Kennedy was the AAA manager for the Albuquerque Dukes. And Dan Duquette, hired him for the Expos. Duquette got to Montreal and realized that he had the book on every single minor league player for the LA Dodgers. And they parlayed that, including Pedro, into some real crazy, crazy good trades. But back to Pedro, another guy that Kennedy knew in LA with Albuquerque was John Wetland. And Wetland was kind of a would they traded Dave Martinez, Willie Green, and Scott Rankin. Ruskin. Sorry for John Wetland.
Who
Um,
is just such a beast at the back end of that bullpen
oh,
for
for sure, for
like,
sure. And then another guy that was deep in the Dodgers system was Henry Rodriguez. You remember O. Henry? They used to throw chocolate bars
yeah.
at O.
Yeah.
Henry, and every once in a while he'd pick one up and eat it. Which I just as an aside, I didn't realize this, but you can't get O. Henry bars in the States. That's a Canadian
Yeah,
thing.
that's a Canadian thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But and they traded amazing. Like they traded Barry Jones. You got to look that guy up for Darren Fletcher. And
Wow.
Fletcher, he emerged as one of the best catchers in baseball. And then they had such a great system. Their minor league system was just so rich with talent. They brought up Cliff Floyd and Rondell White and Kirk Reeder. They were just spitting out these great
Oh,
players.
their player development was incredible right till the very end. I mean, even when they stopped being a competitive team and no one was going to go see them in the early 2000s, they were still turning out guys like Jose Vidro and, like just guys that you're like, how are they developing these 21-year-old kids to be these
Oh,
like, yeah.
well, a lot of it had to do with having that book on a lot of their players were clearly well developed. They invested most of their money into player development
Yeah.
because they had to, because like you said, they were on such a shoestring budget.
The
And
Rays before the Rays.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And they had guys like Kenny Hill and Butch Henry and just fantastic pitchers. Overshadowed a bit by the lineup they had.
Hmm.
But everybody on that team I think it was Cliff Floyd that talked about them all pulling in the same direction. They were such a team, you know. And when
Hmm.
the lockout occurred, uh, Felipe told the guys, "Don't go anywhere. This is going to be done by next weekend. So I want you to stay in Montreal because we're going to be playing." And obviously, like you had alluded to, we would have won the World Series. I think
Hmm.
it would have helped propel a new stadium. It would have just resulted in.
I know it gets talked about a lot, but do you truly believe that the Montreal Expos would still exist as a Major League Baseball team had 94 gone through and they had been given their shot? Yeah.
I can't say I'm not biased,
Yeah.
but I do because if you saw the fan support they were getting in that concrete
Yeah.
toilet bowl, like
Yeah.
oh my God, they would do 45,000, 50,000, 40,000 on a homestand, and you're going, wow, they were outdrawing everybody. They were going to draw 2 million in 1994. They were
Hmm.
they were approaching it in
Yeah,
terms of
they were on
attendance.
pace to push 2.5.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah, I look back and think, if only, if only. I made a little note here. There was another neat little story that when they ended up acquiring a guy named Zane Smith, and they got him for three players, uh, including a guy named Kevin Dean. After they traded him, he went to prison, like long-term prison. So this
oh
was the
wow.
this was their gem in the deal to get Zane Smith. And so when they got this, so yeah, look up Kevin Dean sometime. But when they got Zane Smith, I was just saying this was another major moment for the Expos because that's who they got. They traded Zane Smith and they got Moises Alou. That was how they acquired Moises Alou on another fleece trade.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, that was so good.
Yeah, I just found it so interesting to see how they developed from within, and then they just got these little, these little nuggets just to help fill the crown. The bullpen crew, I they're all coming back. The names are coming back. It was John Wetland and then Jeff Shaw and Tim Scott, Gil Heredia, and
Right, Heredia.
yeah, and Mel Rojas, and like all righties, and it didn't matter.
Well, splits don't matter though. If you get both guys, like if you get both righties and lefties out, I don't like who cares? Like,
Well, just as you know, just going back, the fact that in that environment there, um, back in '94, when you think about it, if they would have just been able to get back on the field, I don't know, but I think that you would have seen an environment where players wanted to come to Montreal because there was such a great following for Felipe, and they made this incredible. I guess Dan Duquette made so many choice moves for the Expos. I guess it was he was replaced by Duquette. The win was replaced by Kevin Malone, and then that was the
mhm.
start of the erosion of the talent and the mass exodus. We got to see all these Expos winning World Series championships.
On other
It was
teams, yeah.
it broke my heart. But one story, if I could
Yeah,
share with you,
absolutely. I want to talk Vladdy too a little bit here, but
yeah. Oh, I
yeah.
got a story for Vladdy. I got to tell you my Vladdy story. Is now a good time?
Let's do it. Let's hear a Vladimir Guerrero story.
Well, Auntie Rianne, she won we were living in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan at the time, and she won it was like a big raffle that was called Save Our Stones. And it was for the curling rink in Moose Jaw. And all of a sudden, we got a knock on the door, we're eating supper, and this guy handed Rianne a bag of money and said, "You won." So what Andy Rand did was took us all to Montreal to go see the Expos, and that was in 2002. Do you know in 2002, Vladimir Guerrero, he hit 336, 39 dingers, 111 RBIs,
Wow.
40 stolen bases, and,
Wow.
and all-star
Of course, I
MVP.
would hope so.
So we went to the game with a few of our friends. Like, I think one game we had 4,500 people to see the Phillies, and then the other game was about 7,500 to see the Mets. So sad.
Yeah.
So we were perched in right field, right? And Vladdy's right below us. And we were just so excited to see him because he was a powerful phenom. So here we go. The Mets get a hit. Jay Payton for the Mets gets a single, and Payton could fly. The guy could absolutely fly. He was just a fabulous base runner, and more than a stolen base man, he was a fantastic base runner, very intrepid and just blazing speed. So a ball is hit into the gap, and Vladdy, just seeing the guy move is so, it was just crazy. He picks up the ball on a short hop, and Peyton is going first to third all the way because it's hitting the gap, right? And we had a perfect line. We watched Vladdy rear back and fire. And it was just like, oh my God. This ball was like on a clothesline pulley, and it came like a missile. And the guy, I'm sorry, I can't remember who was at third, but he had his hand on his hip and kind of like conceding the base to Peyton. And all of a sudden, the ball is there, and he slaps the tag on Peyton,
Yeah.
punches him out, and we were just like, the two of us were, it was just a crazy play. Well,
His
just
arm
add,
was always underrated because he did everything else so well. It was
oh,
like
I mean,
he
we're
had a
we're
cannon.
talking semi deep in the gap, and he threw it to third without a bounce. It was just like, whoo. So later on in that game, Scotty, Peyton's up again. And this time he gets another single. So he's on first base. He's kind of looking at Vladdy, right? And Vladdy's just patrolling right field. And this time it is a legit in the gap, right? And Peyton comes racing around third. Like he could have walked to third. That's how great the ball was hit. Vladdy comes up with the ball, and he does a little bit of like a Statue of Liberty. He just does this little, like a just a little fake throw. And I swear Peyton is a third of the way to third, and he pulls on the brakes, falls on his ass, turns around, and scrambles on all fours back to second and holds onto the bag. Vladdy tosses the ball into the cutoff like a short little. It was just beautiful. It was just because of that previous play that he was scared to
Was
death
in
of
his
Vladdy's
head.
arm.
Yeah. Unreal.
Yeah, but yeah, Guerrero, he could hit a ball anywhere. I mean, and anywhere it was pitched as well. I remember seeing him hit one that had bounced in front of the plate or on the plate, and he smacked it for a double. And yeah, he was such a great player, deserved Hall of Famer. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I do find myself wondering if the Montreal Expos had had the same budgetary availability as the Toronto Blue Jays did in 92, 93, and could have pumped money in 94, 95, 96, how good they could have been. Because the only reason the Expos took a step back was they couldn't keep these players that they kept developing. Like
Yeah.
they really did become a farm system for the rest of baseball, which was part of the
Gotcha.
reason that they wound up losing the franchise. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. And then the team, that incredible support waned because there just wasn't anything to cheer for. It was so sad.
It is
as a
kind of too
lifelong fan.
bad. Like I look back on the landscape of baseball around this country, and one of the reasons why I love baseball so much is when you were in Calgary and getting to go and see these AAA teams in the Calgary Cannons and the Edmonton Trappers, and then it was really cool to see smaller communities like the Lethbridge Expos, that was like the low A team for Montreal for
Yeah.
years, the
The
Medicine Hat
Pioneer
Blue
League was what it
Jays,
was
right?
called. The
Yeah,
Pioneer League, yeah,
the
single A
Pioneer
ball.
League.
Yeah. Well, do you remember you and I and your family, we went and saw Fernando Valenzuela
Oh
pitch?
my goodness,
What a night
absolutely.
that was.
What I remember is how dang excited you and my dad were. Like,
Yeah.
because I would have been, I think I was 9 at the time, and I was just really excited to go to a baseball game, but I wasn't even alive in
Yeah.
Fernando mania, right? Like, but yeah, to see this like phenom pitch in a AAA park, like,
Yeah,
too
and
bad.
he was nearing the end, but he still could bring it. He was pretty chunky at the time, as I
By the
recall.
yeah.
He ballooned a little bit from his. He was always a bit chunky, but yeah, I think
This
you
is a
were more excited about
1979
the
Galarraga we're talking, yeah.
and your Uncle Al as well. The other thing that I remembered that night was you were pretty enthralled with the hot dogs there because you'd never seen hot dogs that big,
hmm
eh?
That
But
trip in general was like, because I remember you really fought with my parents to let me stay up and watch Major League, which like one of my favorite baseball movies of all time. And I mean,
and
it's
not
funny because
appropriate for a nine.
I was just gonna say, looking back now, incredibly inappropriate for a 9-year old. But
Well, I want to tell you back in 1989 when uh, your aunt and I had box season tickets for the Cannons. So every year in the spring they would do a exhibition between the Mariners and the Cannons, right? And guess what? Unfortunately, we were all looking forward to getting to see Ken Griffey Jr. The kid was going to maybe play for Calgary, but he did too good in spring training. I think he might have been the rookie of the year for the American League that year. But anyway, so he shows up to Foothill Stadium with the Mariners to play Calgary. And you've been to so many baseball games, and there's very few moments that stand out like the moment that we saw. It was an incredible thing, and it was more the crowd response than anything. But so Griffey was in center field, and do you know who? Can I just tell you who the infield was for the Calgary Cannons?
yes, please.
Dave Valley at catcher, Edgar Martinez at third base. They had Harold Reynolds at second base, Tino Martinez at first, and guess who the shortstop was? Danny Tartable. And in crazy as that was, the guy in right field was Mickey Brantley, Michael Brantley's dad.
Yeah.
And we thought Mickey was the best player in the team. He was that talented. Like so, anyways, Griffey's in center field. And the old bang box is packed, eh? Because everyone's come to see Griffey, and there's about 7,700 people with standing room, eh? And if you remember Calgary, just as an aside, it had that thin mountain air, so lots of balls,
Yeah.
went out of that park. But in this instance, so I can't recall who the player was for Calgary, but one of those big name players just when you know it's a double when you know it's a double you know it's a double and someone rips one down the left. It's in the gap between left and center. It's a screaming line drive and a sinking line drive, and so we're watching, and it's just like time froze. It was like that we saw this big gazelle of a kid take like 2 steps, and they're about 8 feet steps, and he reaches down and he catches this ball So the moment that I wanted to share was 7,700 people went, oh, at once. It was like a moment of shock in the crowd. It was just like, oh, like that. And everybody in the stadium at once did that. And it just was the weirdest sound because it was loud. And then all of a sudden the whole crowd stood up and gave him a standing O. It was crazy.
Wow.
It was just it was one of those moments. It's probably like that Curtis Pride moment I talked about earlier, but yeah, it was
It
pretty
just, you
cool.
know what? Honestly, it almost works me up a little reminiscing about like what used to be on the
Yeah,
prairies there. Like, and what's really frustrating is when you talk about the AAA teams like the Trappers, like the Cannons,
yeah,
it wasn't a lack of attendance as to why it folded. It was just the travel was so far and so much to get it that they were just like, it's going to be easier to just put it all in the US, which is
yeah,
honestly just such a shame because this country used to be full of affiliate ball teams where you could go
exactly.
and we could sit around and name names like this. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Ottawa Lynx was the affiliate for the Expos and yeah, the
yeah.
Trappers and yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. And then it was really neat to see the teams from the Albuquerque Dukes come up and
Hmm.
see these upcoming stars for the Dodgers. Yeah, it was really yeah, time to reminisce for sure. For sure. And I just couldn't believe how all those players on the are on the Cannons. They all became stars,
Yes, they
big
did,
stars. Like
didn't
there's a
they?
trophy named after Edgar Martinez.
Yeah. And I mean, what a storied career. And it is too bad that there isn't that presence around Canada like there used to be. So before I let you go, and
Okay.
also if you've got a couple stories here, like don't let me rush you out of here, but
No, I
um
think I got my good ones out.
the Expos.
Yeah.
This was your team all along.
Hmm.
I know you're a San Francisco Giants fan now, and a lot of this stems from your love of Willie Mays, and he was your favorite player
Yeah,
growing up as a kid.
absolutely.
Is I know your love of baseball, and that's why you follow the Giants so closely still, and you follow baseball. Is it different without the Expos?
Yeah, I kind of feel like I lost my team. I would dump the Giants in a heartbeat if the Expos came
Yeah.
back. And it's not fair to express resentment toward the Blue Jays, but there was a lot of, there was a lot of interesting dynamics with television rights and
Hmm.
television revenue that didn't help the Expos at that time as well. So I didn't mean, necessarily blame the Blue Jays, but uh,
They
I,
didn't
I
help.
had I
Let's be
had some hard
serious. They
feelings.
didn't help. Yeah.
But you've got me coming around to the Blue Jays. I have to tell you. Look at I'm wearing a Blue
Well,
Jays hat.
yeah, we're gonna get you on board and fully invested just in time for a long rebuild here.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And well, maybe we'll see something exciting happen this upcoming season.
Yeah.
I don't think my Giants are going to be anywhere near contenders for a while. That juggernaut in LA is just unbeatable.
Yeah. And the fact they're even talking to Juan Soto right now actually kind of gets my ire
Oh,
up a little.
please no.
I'm just like, come on. Like if he signs with the Dodgers, I'm like, baseball's ruined. It's become the NBA full of just like, wherever LeBron wants his team to be. But
Here's your $400 million contract.
yeah.
Yeah, for
Okay,
sure.
before I let you go, here one last question for you, Uncle Alan. And again, thank you so much. This is something I've wanted to do for a while now, is just sit down with you and have a conversation. Because every time we visit each other, this is what we wind up doing. And thought
Talking baseball.
I thought it would be a fun episode. But as someone who has seen Vladimir Guerrero in person,
Yeah.
when you see Junior, how good do you think Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is in comparison? Do you think he can be? And listen, I hate to push Hall of Fame type narratives on a
Mm-hmm.
25-year-old who is still at least 10 solid years away from being truly considered. But is that ceiling there? is he now this is a question Ross Atkins danced around and wouldn't answer, but is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. generational in your opinion?
That's a really good question because if I really believe that, I would say yes, indeed. And I'm thinking about your question and going, well, maybe, maybe, possibly. And I would never
The
have
Ross
answered it.
Atkins, yes.
Yeah, I would never have answered it that way if you asked me about senior. I
Yeah.
would have said, yeah, like immediately. Like in 2002, I think he was the greatest baseball player on the
Hmm.
planet. I have never said that about Junior. I don't. He's had some spectacular years, and I love the guy. And
Hmm.
I guess the dynamic of Vladimir Senior was that he had more of a, I think, more of a presence in the locker room. He had more of a. I don't think Vladdy Junior's distracted, but there's times where I wonder about his focus and intensity, which I never questioned about Senior.
Hmm.
He came to play every game, and it's not a real criticism of Junior. I just think that his dad was just that much more amped up than he was. Different people, different
Of
personalities,
course.
but he sure brings a lot of. I think Junior does. And they're still experimenting with his positioning too,
Yeah.
which I think it's got to be resolved. Is he your third baseman or your first baseman or your DH? Let's just put that to bed.
Yeah.
Start of next season. This is what's happening. Um, I don't know. I didn't really answer your question, but
No, you
I
did. You did. And you know what? It's a very good point that if we all thought he was generational, we wouldn't be sitting around humming and hawing, being like, well, I mean, you can twist it like he is, but probably need another couple of years of what we saw last year before we really have this conversation again.
but you know what? I don't think Vladdy Senior had Otani shadow over him either. There was
Yes.
there wasn't a
Yes.
player in baseball that could compare. And
Yes.
now,
Yeah, there wasn't the modern day Babe Ruth
yeah,
playing. Yeah.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's
By
unfortunate.
the way, for everyone listening, I do just want to say Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is incredible. I do think the Blue Jays should sign him. I think he's a top 20 player in baseball. I'm just saying
Absolutely.
he's not for sure a top five guy, and there isn't a for sure Hall of Fame stamp on him quite yet. So
Yeah, you
before I
betcha.
get comments, yeah. All right, Uncle Al, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I love talking baseball with you. I can't wait till the next time we do it in person and appreciate you
For
taking the
sure.
time.
I had a great time too. Thank you. I hope I didn't bore your listeners too much.
I guarantee you did not.